The fake security guard's hand cracked across my wife's face, and I froze in disbelief from the kitchen window. I'd just come home early from training, planning to surprise Emily with lunch. When I saw him, some rent-a-cop wannabe, blocking her in our driveway. She was juggling grocery bags, trying to keep her cool, while his voice boomed about HOA rules. A carton of milk slipped, spilling across the Texas asphalt, the sour smell already rising in the heat. Then it happened. Crack. His palm connected with her cheek so hard she stumbled, groceries bursting. Around her feet like a battlefield of broken eggs and shattered glass. He laughed, actually laughed, while grinding his boot into the mess, straightening a fake badge that didn't mean a damn thing. Next time, lady, follow the rules. That smirk burned into me. What he didn't know. The training I had just returned from wasn't some office retreat. It was advanced combat instruction, techniques forged for war, not playground bullies. And now? Now I was calculating, heart pounding, hands curling into fists. Tell me, what would you do if some fake cop put his hands on your spouse? Drop a comment. Because this wasn't just intimidation. This was personal. And this imposter was about to learn why you never, ever mess with a Navy SEAL's family. But before I show you how it all went down, let me rewind and tell you how we got here. My name's Daniel Hayes, 40 years old, husband to Emily, father of 2, and for the last 18 years, a Navy SEAL. Most folks in this neighborhood just know me as the quiet guy on the corner who waves when he mows the lawn, the one who grills on Sundays and coaches Little League when I'm home. They don't see the years of sand, salt, and blood caked into my memory, the firefights in places most Americans couldn't point to on a map, the operations that never make the news, the kind of missions where hesitation gets your brothers killed. That life carved me into something hard, disciplined, and maybe a little distant, but Emily, she's the one who kept me tethered, a pediatric nurse with a laugh that could cut through any darkness. She's the reason I ever wanted a home in the first place. When deployments pulled me oceans away, she was the anchor raising our kids, balancing chaos, keeping the world steady. So when we moved to this suburban neighborhood, I thought maybe we'd finally found peace. Just a clean-cut street, friendly faces and rules posted on a bulletin board nobody actually reads. I never thought we'd have to defend ourselves here. Never thought a man pretending to be law would cross the line and lay his hands on my wife. But as I tell you this, you'll see how it all started small, almost laughable, until it spiraled into something dangerous. It started with notes, slipped under our door, tucked into the mailbox, taped to the windshield of Emily's car. At first they seemed almost harmless. Trash cans left out too long, grass 1 inch too high, unauthorized bird feeder, little things no normal neighbor would care about. But these messages weren't just reminders, they were threats disguised as HOA notices. Bold red ink, sometimes underlined twice, with phrases like final warning and penalties enforced. Emily laughed it off, saying it was just some bored retiree with too much time, but I knew better. The language was off, too aggressive, too personal. Then one afternoon, while tightening a loose board on the fence, I caught him, this stocky guy, in a cheap uniform pacing our driveway, jotting notes on a clipboard like he owned the place. His badge looked wrong, shiny but flimsy, and the way he carried himself screamed fake authority. "You Hayes?" he barked, squinting at me like he was daring me to challenge him. I didn't answer, just stared, long enough to make him uncomfortable. He muttered something about violations and walked off, boots crunching, on the gravel like he was trying too hard to sound official. My instincts told me this wasn't just a nosy neighbor or a crank. This was a man looking for power, picking the wrong family to test. And I had no idea then how far he'd go, or how many times he'd circle back into our lives, each visit darker than the last. The next time I saw him, it wasn't a clipboard in his hand, it was a flashlight beam, cutting across our driveway at midnight like we were suspects in some crime. Emily had just tucked the kids in when the light flooded our living room through the blinds, jittery and invasive. I stepped onto the porch, barefoot, the boards creaking under my weight. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I asked, voice low but steady. He didn't flinch, just smirked and tapped that flimsy badge pinned to his chest. "Routine inspection," he said, like he was FBI instead of some HOA hall monitor playing dress-up. His eyes flicked to Emily, who had come to the doorway behind me, Her, arms crossed, her nurse scrubs still on from a 12-hour shift. He lingered a second too long, that smirk crawling wider. "You'll want to fix those blinds," he added, pointing at the window like he owned it. My fists tightened at my sides, every muscle screaming to put him on the ground, but years of discipline told me not yet, not here, not with the kids asleep upstairs. He finally backed away, his flashlight bouncing across the pavement, his shadow stretching long like a warning. Emily whispered, "Dan, this isn't normal." She was right. This wasn't an inspection, it was a test, and I knew deep down we'd just failed his first one. 2 weeks later, I was called back for a short training rotation out of state. Nothing unusual, just routine drills. But the timing couldn't have been worse. With me gone, Emily became the target. She called me one evening, her voice shaky, whispering like the kids might overhear. "Dan." He was in the driveway again, just standing there. No clipboard this time, no flashlight, just watching. My gut clenched. I told her to lock the doors, turn on the cameras, keep the phone close. But cameras only catch shadows, and this man wasn't afraid of shadows. The next morning, Emily found another note taped to our garage. "Non-compliance will not be tolerated." No HOA letterhead, no signature, just those words in red ink. She tried to brush it off for the kids' sake, but I could hear it in her voice. Every creak of the house at night had her on edge. Our daughter asked why Mommy jumped when the doorbell rang. Our son asked if the police were mad at us. And I was stuck hundreds of miles away, training men half my age how to fight, while my wife fought a war at home I couldn't see. I told myself I'd be back soon, that this was just noise, but in my gut, I knew. This wasn't random, this was deliberate, and the fake cop wasn't done. He was only warming up. When I finally came home, the first thing I noticed wasn't Emily's smile, or the kids running to the door. It was the dent in our mailbox. A fist-sized crater in the metal, like someone had slammed it just to send a message. Emily tried to play it off, said it must have been kids messing around, but the way her eyes darted toward the driveway told me everything. Later that night, when the kids were asleep, she pulled a folder from the kitchen drawer. Inside were the notes, not 2 or 3 like I thought, dozens, each one more aggressive, the handwriting jagged, desperate. "You've been warned. This is your last chance. Comply or face consequences." My chest tightened as I flipped through them, the red ink smearing where Emily's fingers had trembled. I looked at her cheek, still faintly bruised from the slap I'd witnessed weeks earlier, and rage simmered just under my skin. I asked why she hadn't told me the full truth, and she said, "Because I knew what you'd do, Dan, and I was afraid you'd end up in jail." She wasn't wrong. Every instinct in me wanted to hunt him down that second, but instead I took a breath, forced the soldier in me to stay calm. "He wants control," I said. "So we take that away from him." I didn't know yet how bad things would get, but I knew one thing. The next move would be his, and I was ready to answer it. The next move came fast, and it was brazen. Saturday morning, sun barely up, the sound of gravel crunching pulled me to the window. There he was again, standing in our driveway like he owned it. Hands on his hips, that same cheap badge glinting in the light. But this time he wasn't alone. A beat-up sedan idled at the curb with 2 guys inside, watching. He pointed at our house, muttering something to them, then turned and shouted, loud enough for the whole street to hear, "Non-compliance has consequences." The words echoed off the quiet houses, neighbors peeking through curtains but doing nothing. Emily gripped my arm, whispering, "Dan, he's escalating." She was right. This wasn't a man with a clipboard anymore. This was a performance. Intimidation dressed up like authority, staged for an audience. I stepped outside, calm, deliberate, years of training guiding my every move. He smirked as I approached, leaning just close enough to whisper, "Last warning, soldier boy." My pulse pounded, but I kept my face unreadable, memorizing every detail, the license, plate, the twitch in his jaw, the fake security patch stitched crooked on his sleeve. He wanted me to snap. He wanted the neighbors to see me lose control. Instead, I just stared until he finally backed toward the car, the sedan pulling away with a low growl. Emily asked what he meant by last warning. I didn't have an answer, but I knew one thing. The line had been crossed, and the war was already at our doorstep. I wasn't about to sit back and let some wannabe cop terrorize my family, so I started digging. First stop, the HOA office. I walked in calm, polite, asked for the records on their security staff. The manager, a nervous guy who couldn't stop adjusting his glasses, flipped through a binder and frowned. "We don't have security officers," he finally admitted. My jaw clenched. I pressed further, showed him a photo I'd snapped of the fake badge from a distance. He shook his head. "Never seen it before. Definitely not ours." That was confirmation. Whoever this guy was, he wasn't tied to the HOA at all. So I went deeper, ran the plates I'd memorized through a buddy of mine who owed me a favor in law enforcement. The call I got back that night twisted my gut. The car wasn't registered to any security company. It belonged to a man named Victor Malone, no law enforcement record, but a long trail of harassment complaints, restraining orders, and one expulsion from a private security job for excessive force. My buddy warned me, "Dan, this guy's a loose wire. Watch yourself." Emily listened quietly as I relayed it, her face pale but resolute. "So he's not official," she said, "just a bully with a costume." But to me that made him even more dangerous. At least with real cops there are rules. With Malone, there were none. And men with nothing to lose are the ones you should fear most. The first time Malone crossed the line with my kids, I nearly lost it. It was a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of hot Texas day where the air feels heavy, and Emily had taken the kids outside to ride their bikes in the cul-de-sac. I was in the garage, fixing a loose hinge, when I heard our daughter scream. I bolted out to see Malone's sedan crawling past the curb, window rolled down. He wasn't shouting this time. He was smiling, waving a toy badge in his hand like it was some sick game. "Rules keep you safe, kids," he called, his voice syrupy, mocking. Our son froze on his bike, confused, while our daughter pedaled back toward Emily in tears. I felt my chest ignite. I stormed into the street, every instinct screaming to drag him out of that car. But he just laughed, tapped 2 fingers on the fake badge, and sped off. Emily pulled the kids close, trembling, whispering, "Dan, he's involving them now." That night, I tucked the kids into bed and saw the fear in their eyes, the kind that doesn't fade easy. I sat in the dark, watching the security footage, grainy clips of Malone, circling our house like a vulture, and I knew something had to give. He wanted power. He wanted us rattled. But now he'd made his biggest mistake. Because when a man threatens my wife, I grit my teeth and prepare. But when he dares to scare my children, that's when war becomes inevitable. That night, after the kids finally drifted to sleep, I sat in the living room. With the lights off, the glow of the security monitors painting my face, Malone thought he was dealing with a soft suburban family, but he had no idea what 18 years in. The SEALs teaches you about patience, about control, about hunting men who think they're predators. I pulled out a small notebook I hadn't touched since deployment, an old habit, planning missions step by step. Phase 1, Intel. I traced Malone's routes, logged the times he circled, cross-referenced with the neighbors' cameras. He wasn't random. He was deliberate, testing weak spots, probing reactions. Phase 2, preparation. I reinforced the locks, added motion lights, and set up decoy cameras where he could see them, while the real ones stayed hidden. Emily watched me quietly, worry etched in her face. But she didn't stop me. She knew this was the only way I'd sleep at night. Phase 3, engagement. I wasn't looking for a fight, not yet, but I wanted Malone to know the game had changed. So I left a chair in the driveway with a single note taped to it, "We're watching too." It wasn't a threat, it was a promise. The next morning, the chair was knocked over, the note gone. Malone had taken the bait, and for the first time I felt the balance shift. He'd crossed into my battlefield now, and in my battlefield, I never lose. It happened on a Friday night, the kind of night when the air hangs still, heavy with a storm that hasn't broken yet. Emily had just put the kids to bed when the sound of glass shattering ripped through the silence. I sprinted toward the kitchen. One of the back windows lay in shards, the curtain swaying in the humid breeze, and there he was, Malone, standing half in, half out of my home, crowbar in hand, eyes wild with the thrill of crossing that final line. "Last chance, Hayes," he hissed, voice low but vibrating with something unhinged. Emily gasped behind me, and in that instant, I felt the SEAL in me snap awake. My hands curled into fists, my body coiled, every muscle remembering training I'd promised I'd left behind. Malone stepped further in, glass crunching under his boots. crowbar lifting just slightly, daring me. Your family doesn't follow rules. You think you're above the HOA? You're not above me. His words were nonsense now, drunk on his own fantasy of control. I kept my voice even, calm but edged with steel. You picked the wrong house, Malone. And the wrong man. For a flicker, I saw doubt in his eyes, but then he sneered, lunged forward, and the room exploded into chaos. That was the moment the war stopped being about warnings or intimidation. It became survival. And I was done waiting. The crowbar whistled through the air, but I was already moving. Years of drills had trained me to read the shoulders, not the weapon. And Malone's body screamed his intention before he even swung. I ducked low, drove my shoulder into his gut, then the impact sent. Him stumbling back into the counter, dishes shattering around us. He swung again, wild, desperate, but sloppy. I trapped his wrist, twisted, and the crowbar clanged to the floor. For a second, his eyes widened, panic breaking through the arrogance, but then he lunged with his fists, clawing like a cornered animal. His punches landed, but they were untrained, fueled by rage, not skill. Mine were precise, controlled. One to the ribs, one to the jaw. He grunted, spit flying, but still he came. Emily's voice cut through the chaos. "Dan, stop!" But my blood was roaring too loud. I pinned him against the wall, my forearm across his throat, his face turning red as he thrashed. For a moment, I wanted to end it right there, to make sure he never touched my family again. But then I saw my reflection in the kitchen window, the soldier, the killer, and behind me Emily's terrified eyes. I forced myself to release, shoving him to the ground. He gasped, coughing, crawling for the crowbar. And I knew this wasn't over, not yet. Because men like Malone don't retreat, they reload. And I had just given him a reason to come back harder. I thought the fight had broken him, but predators don't quit, they wait. 2 nights later, just past midnight, the alarm tripped. A shadow moved through the backyard, deliberate, slower this time, like he was hunting. I grabbed the pistol from the safe, not because I wanted to use it, but because I refused to gamble with my family's lives again. Through the window, I saw Malone creeping along the fence line, his face bruised and swollen, a knife glinting in his hand. He wasn't here to intimidate anymore. He was here to finish it. I slipped outside, silent as the desert nights I'd patrolled overseas, circling wide until I was behind him. He froze when my voice cut through the dark. "End of the line, Malone." He spun, knife raised, but the sight of my weapon stopped him cold. His breathing was ragged, eyes darting like a trapped animal, but there was no surrender in him, only madness. He lunged anyway, a final reckless charge. In one motion, I sidestepped, twisted his wrist, and the knife skittered across the concrete. My boot pressed into his chest, pinning him flat, the barrel leveled at his face. For a heartbeat, all I saw was the man who slapped my wife, who scared. My kids, who thought he could play God with a badge he didn't earn. But I didn't pull the trigger. Instead, I shouted for Emily to call the cops, my voice sharp and final. "It's over." And for the first time, Malone believed me. The cops came fast that night, lights painting our street red and blue. Neighbors spilling onto porches with wide eyes and hushed whispers. They dragged Malone away in cuffs, muttering threats he couldn't back up anymore. And just like that, the nightmare was over, or at least it felt that way. The bruises on Emily's face faded, but the memory hasn't. The fear in my kids' eyes when they talk about the bad man lingers, and maybe it always will. But here's what Malone never understood. Authority isn't a badge, or a uniform, or a set of fake rules. Authority is earned through honor, respect, and sacrifice. He had none of it. And he learned the hard way you don't target a military family and walk away unscathed. Now let me ask you, what would you have done if some fake cop terrorized your home? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I know plenty of you have HOA horror stories of your own. If you want to hear more tales of justice, revenge, and the dark side of neighborhoods like this, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.